do maple trees make sap? They accumulate starch during their growing season. With the spring thaw, enzymes transform the starch into sugar. When the trees absorb water through their roots, it mixes with that sugar to make sap. Long before the white man came to North America, the native Indians revered the maple tree. In early spring, they'd pierce its trunk with a tomahawk, then place a wood chip under the hole to channel the sap into a bark container. Then they boiled the sap over a fire in clay pots. The Indians introduced maple syrup to the European settlers. Today, most producers use tubing instead of sap buckets. No more trudging through the snow from tree to tree. The time to collect sap is in the early spring, when the maple trees are still dormant and when the temperature hits 3 or 4 degrees above freezing. The freeze and thaw cycle alters the pressure inside the tree and starts the sap flowing. The first step is to tap the trees. They drill a hole 1 centimeter in diameter, 5 centimeters deep. Then gently insert a spout made of metal or plastic. It's important not to damage the bark. That not only harms the tree, but also lets air in the sap, which ruins the flavor. You don't see too many sap buckets around anymore. Today, sap is pumped through polyethylene tubes to larger collector tubes. Then into the pumping station. Sap is 97.5% water and only 2.5% sugar, so to transform the sap to syrup, they have to boil it down. It takes 40 liters of sap to make just 1 liter of syrup. When the tank fills up, the sap is automatically pumped to the sugar house into a stainless steel tank. The more advanced producers use a specialized machine that partially concentrates the sap by reverse osmosis. This more than triples the sap's natural sugar level and means they'll have less boiling to do. From there, the sap flows to the evaporator. They heat the sap to the boiling point and keep it boiling however long it takes to evaporate 66% of the water. If the water evaporates too slowly or too quickly, that'll adversely affect the color, flavor, and texture of the syrup. However, and here's where expertise is everything, there's no set cooking time. Experienced maple sugar producers can tell when it's ready just by looking at it. They test the sugar level using a device called a hydrotherm. When the syrup is just right, they run it through a pressure filter to remove calcium residues and other impurities. They store the syrup in steam-cleaned barrels. The lab at the central warehouse tests a sample from each drum. Using sophisticated instruments, technicians classify the color from dark to extra light. They also assess the quality. Lower grade syrup is for industrial use, higher grade for the retail market. They pasteurize this syrup, then put it into huge stainless steel storage tanks. The tanks are vacuum sealed with a nitrogen barrier to preserve the flavor and color and to prevent fermentation. It also keeps the syrup from crystallizing. The lab then uses an instrument called an atomic absorption spectrophotometer to analyze the syrup's mineral content, making sure it meets market standards. Next, they warm the syrup in stainless steel heaters and run it through industrial-size filters. This step ensures the syrup will be perfectly clear. Then, just before bottling, they heat the syrup again, this time to 82 degrees Celsius. This not only sterilizes the bottles, but also guarantees the syrup will have a 4-year shelf life. maple syrup is high in sugar but has somewhat fewer calories than honey or brown sugar. It's 100% pure and natural, and it's a good source of 3 essential nutrients: calcium, potassium, and magnesium. It's Winnie the Pooh's favorite treat. It's sweet and sticky, and it's all produced by an industrious and intelligent insect whose miniature society is one of the most sophisticated in the animal kingdom. It all begins in a field where worker honeybees suck nectar from flower blossoms such as clover. They store it in their honey sac, then return to the hive where other worker bees suck it out and chew it, breaking down the nectar's complex sugars into 2 simple sugars called glucose and fructose. The bees then deposit the nectar into the cells of the wax honeycombs they've built. They fan it with their wings until most of its water content evaporates in the warm air of the beehive. What's left is thick and gooey honey. The bees then cap each honey-filled cell with beeswax. That's when the beekeeper steps in. Bees will sting if taken by surprise, so the beekeeper sprays the hive with smoke from burning pine needles, a scented warning that foreigners are about to enter the hive. Inside the hive are wooden frames hanging side by side, each holding a honeycomb. A hive can house hundreds of thousands of bees, all descendants of the prolific grand poobah of beedom, the queen bee. She's the big one in the middle. The queen bee lays up to 2,000 eggs a day, creating the workforce needed to feed and protect the colony. But the beekeeper tricks the colony's defenders. He replaces the hive's cover with a device called a bee escape, which smells like cherries. Bees dislike the scent, so most fly to the bottom sections of the hive. Another warning spray, and the beekeeper removes the bee escape. Now he can escape with the honeycombs. Inside the honey factory, they put the honeycomb frames on what's called an uncapping machine. Like a razor, it shaves the wax caps off the honey-filled cells of the combs. They scrape off the remnants manually. Then they set the frames on another machine called a honey extractor. It spins the honeycombs until all the honey is forced out of the cells. Afterwards, they filter the honey to remove any pieces of wax capping that slip through. Then, the honey is ready for bottling. Some beehives contain smaller frames designed to produce honey that isn't extracted from the honeycomb. Workers remove the frame and cut the honeycomb into pieces as is with a heated knife. That seals the wax around the honey inside. You eat it, wax and all. The beeswax lining of the honeycomb goes to make candles, furniture polish, lipsticks, and other products. When producers have more liquid honey than they can sell, they simply let it granulate, develop sugar crystals, and turn hard and white. Then, when the orders come in, they return it to its original liquid form by heating it to 130 degrees Fahrenheit. They vacuum clean the jars. Then fill them. One beehive can yield up to 7 pounds of honey in a single day. That's much more than the bees need for themselves. The surplus is what we end up eating. Honey production today is both efficient and humane. For centuries, the only way to harvest honey from hives had been to kill the bees. Then, in 1851, an American beekeeper invented a way to get the honey, yet spare the bees. His method, with the removable honeycomb frames, is the one we still use today.